They laughed while my father pinned me down, all four of them. The smiles didn't drain until they realized I'd been recording everything. The wrench hit my face before I even saw it move. One second, I was sitting at the dinner table, defending my job to a man I'd met 40 minutes ago. The next, I was on the linoleum floor, and the world had gone the particular shade of white that means your brain is rebooting from trauma. I couldn't hear anything for a few seconds, just a ringing. High, clean, indifferent, like a tuning fork held too close to my skull. Then the sounds came back. Laughter. My mother's laugh first. That short, satisfied bark she made whenever she proved a point. Then my sister Madison's. Higher. Almost delighted. The way she used to laugh when she told embarrassing stories about me at Christmas. And finally, threading through both of them, a man's low chuckle. Controlled. Amused. The kind of laugh that belongs in a boardroom, not over a woman bleeding on a kitchen floor. I tried to push myself up. That's when my father grabbed my wrists and pinned them to the linoleum, so I couldn't protect my face. One hit wasn't enough, Madison said above me. I heard the scrape of her chair. Here. My mother must have tossed something because there was a brief silence, and then Madison said, "Your turn," in the light, breezy tone she used when offering someone the last piece of cake. I heard the metal before I felt it. Then I didn't feel anything for a very long time. Part 1. The Exile Seat. You need to understand something about the Harper family before I go any further. We looked perfect from the outside. My parents, Eleanor and Robert Harper, had a 4-bedroom colonial in Westport, Connecticut, with good landscaping and a Volvo in the driveway. My mother ran a lifestyle blog that had about 40,000 followers. She posted about slow Sundays and Italian linen and the importance of family dinner. My father was a structural engineer who coached youth soccer for 12 years and had a plaque on the wall of the town recreation center to prove it. I am Emily Harper. I am 29 years old. I have a master's in social work from UConn and a job I've had for 4 years at a nonprofit in New Haven, where I work with at-risk youth, mostly teenagers, mostly kids who've been failed by the adults who were supposed to love them. I'll let that irony breathe for a moment. Madison is 32. She is, objectively, the sun around which the Harper solar system has always orbited. She's beautiful in the specific way that photographs easily. Bone structure, long legs, a laugh that fills whatever room she's in. She works in marketing and has never in her adult life paid her own cell phone bill. My parents have always called this helping her get on her feet. She's been getting on her feet for approximately a decade. The drafty end of the table, the chair that sat in the gap between the heating vent and the side door, where the Connecticut winter found its way in through the weather stripping no one had replaced since 2004. That was my seat. It had always been my seat. Family photos from my childhood show this without anyone meaning them to. Madison in the center, beaming. Me at the edge, slightly blurred, in a shirt I'd recognize 5 years later as one of Madison's hand-me-downs. I had been told in various ways and with varying degrees of gentleness that this was because I was more independent and less sensitive than Madison, that I was low maintenance, that they didn't have to worry about Emily. I spent 14 years writing about it in journals, not because I planned to do anything with them, just because writing it down was the only way to make it feel real, the only way to prove to myself that I wasn't imagining things. I should have known even then that those journals were a weapon. I just didn't know who I was going to need to use them on. Part 2. Travis Madison called 3 weeks before the dinner to tell us she was bringing someone home. The way she said it, breathless, proprietary, like she was announcing a prize, should have been the first warning sign. Madison had brought home boyfriends before. None of them had ever gotten this introduction. This was a presentation. His name is Travis Mercer, she told me separately in a phone call I hadn't asked for. He's at Goldman Sachs, VP level. He has an apartment in Tribeca and a house in the Hamptons. Is he kind? I asked. There was a pause. He's successful, Em. I drove up from New Haven on a Saturday in November, arriving at the house just before 6. My mother had put out the good china, the set she kept in the hutch that I was not, as a child, allowed to touch. The dining room table had been extended to its full length for the first time in years. There were candles. There was a pot roast that had been cooking since morning. Travis Mercer arrived at 6:15 with a bottle of wine that cost more than my car payment. He was tall, with the kind of jaw that reads well on camera, and the kind of posture that comes from years of being told you're important. He wore an Italian suit, charcoal, perfectly fitted, and he had what I can only describe as dead eyes. Not cruel, not warm, just calculating, like a man who is constantly, quietly, appraising the room. My father stood up to shake his hand. First time I'd seen him move that fast in years. Travis sat down, picked up his fork, and immediately began looking at me. Not the way men sometimes look at women across dinner tables. Not with attraction or curiosity. With assessment. Like he was pricing something, running a quiet algorithm. I couldn't figure out what he was calculating, and that low, persistent discomfort settled into my stomach and stayed there through the salad course. So what do you do? He asked, cutting Madison off mid-sentence about the Hamptons house. Social work, I said. At-risk youth in New Haven. I watched his smirk form before I'd finished the sentence. Small, controlled. The smirk of a man who has already filed you under a category and found that category unimpressive. That's admirable, he said in the tone people use when they mean the opposite. I should have let it go. I know that. 4 years of working with teenagers has taught me that not every battle is worth the cost of fighting it. But something about the smirk, about the way Madison was already laughing softly at his side, already editing herself to fit his rhythm, something about the way my mother was nodding along like Travis had said something profound instead of something dismissive. I'm actually working on a case right now, I said. 16-year-old girl. She was sleeping in her car for 3 months before anyone referred her to us. She just got placed in stable housing last week. The table went quiet for exactly 1 second. Don't waste his time with your depressing little stories, my mother said. She said it without looking at me, casually, the way you'd swat a fly. Something cracked open inside my chest. Not new. That fracture had been there for years. But this time, with a stranger's smirking face across the table, something slipped. It's not depressing, Mom, I said. It's meaningful. It helps real people. Unlike flying to Bali twice a year to take photos for strangers on the internet. The silence that followed was total. My mother turned to look at me, and then the world went white. Part 3. The ER. I remember the ceiling of the ambulance. White paneling with a strip of yellow light. I remember a paramedic's voice, calm, professional, doing the thing they're trained to do, which is pretend that what they're looking at is routine. I remember thinking, with the detached clarity of a brain in shock, that her name tag said Reyes and that her hands were very steady. I don't remember the impact itself. That's apparently common with grade 3 concussions. I remember the ER nurse, Angela, according to her badge, with kind eyes and the weary precision of someone who has seen too much and refuses to stop caring anyway. She took my vitals, asked me to track her finger, frowned at the results in the specific way medical professionals frown when they're managing your fear by not showing you their own. Fractured orbital bone, she told me later, after the imaging. Grade 3 concussion. Your jaw is wired shut. Wired shut. I processed that for a moment, felt the metal in my mouth with my tongue. The wires felt like something out of a nightmare, functional and wrong, caging something that was mine. Detective Linda Chen arrived 40 minutes after that. She was from the Westport PD. 15 years on the force, she told me later, though she didn't lead with that. She led with pulling a chair up to my bedside and sitting down like she had all the time in the world, and opening a notebook, and looking at me with an expression that was not quite sympathy and not quite professional distance, but something useful between the two. I told her everything I could through wire and swelling. It took a long time. She didn't rush me once. She wrote things down, asked clarifying questions, the kind of questions that make you realize she'd already begun organizing this into something prosecutable before I'd finished the first paragraph. Before you go any further, she said, when I paused for a breath, I want you to know something. A neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, the house directly east, saw what happened through the kitchen window. She called 911 before it was over. She's the reason the ambulance got there when it did. I stared at the ceiling. A neighbor, not my mother, not my father, not Madison, standing with a wrench in her hand and laughter on her face. A woman with a garden hose and a view through a window had decided my life was worth saving. I didn't cry. I wanted to, but my face was too swollen, and the wires were in the way, and somewhere underneath the shock there was something harder forming, something that wasn't grief exactly, something that had a shape and a direction to it. Mrs. Rodriguez is willing to give a full statement, Detective Chen said. She saw all 4 of them. She can identify the wrench. She has a description of the sequence of events. All 4 of them. That detail hit me a half-second later. Travis. Travis had been there. Travis had laughed. He tried to hide it, Chen said, reading something in my expression. The wrench. Before we arrived. Officer Daly noted it when they responded. It was moved from the kitchen to the garage and the window between the 911 call and our arrival. That's going to matter. I thought about Travis Mercer's dead eyes, his calculated smirk, the way he'd appraised me across the dinner table like I was an inconvenient line item. That detail, the wrench, moved to the garage, made me smile for the first time in what felt like a year. It was a small smile. It hurt, but it was mine. Part 4. Daniel Kraus. I made one phone call from that hospital bed. I'd saved the number 4 years earlier, after a case at work. A family situation that had made me understand, viscerally, that certain people needed lawyers the way other people needed oxygen. I'd written it in the back of my planner, just in case. I'd never expected to use it. Kraus law, family litigation, and civil claims. A woman's voice, crisp, after hours professional. I need to speak with Daniel Kraus, I said. Or tried to. It came out slurred and metallic through the wires. He's unavailable after. Tell him I have a fractured orbital bone and a wired jaw, and I want to destroy the people who did it. There was a brief pause. I'll put you through. Daniel Kraus arrived at New Haven Yale Medical Center at 11:47 p.m. He was 51, with steel gray hair and the kind of quiet intensity that comes from 23 years of winning cases other lawyers had declined. He wore a coat over what looked like weekend clothes. He'd driven 70 minutes on a Saturday night because of a phone call from a stranger slurring through dental wire. He looked at my face. His professional mask slipped for exactly 1 second. Then he opened his laptop. Tell me everything, he said. Not just tonight, all of it. So I told him. About the fractures and the concussion, yes, but also about the college fund. My maternal grandparents had left me $38,000 earmarked explicitly, in the will, in writing, for my education. I'd been told when I turned 18 that it had been invested on my behalf. The year I started undergrad, my mother presented Madison Madison with a white BMW 3 Series with a bow on the hood and a Facebook photo that got 300 likes. I'd never asked about the college fund again. I'd taken loans instead. I told him about the journals, 14 years of them, stored in a medium-sized cardboard box in a storage unit in New Haven, labeled personal in my handwriting. Every birthday forgotten, every school event unattended, every time I'd been told I was fine when I wasn't, every time Madison's cruelty had been laughed off as just joking around. 14 years of dates and details and exact words, written by a girl who'd known on some instinctive level that she was going to need evidence someday. Daniel's eyes did something behind his glasses, like a man who has just found a weapon and is already calculating its range. "Where is the storage unit?" he asked. "On Wally Avenue. I have the key." He was already standing up. "I'll have someone there first thing in the morning. Those journals don't leave my sight until we've made copies." He left me with his direct number, a card, and the instruction to document everything. Every medical procedure, every medication, every conversation I could remember from that dinner table. He said it in the same tone people use when they say this is going to be a fight, and we are going to win it, without using those words at all. I lay back in that hospital bed with wires in my jaw and a fractured eye socket, and I felt, for the first time in a very long time, like someone was standing on my side of the line. Part 5. The Architecture of Evidence. The setup took 4 months. Daniel filed the civil suit the week after I was discharged, but the real work happened in the months that followed. A slow, methodical dismantling of the Harper family's very carefully maintained public image. He pulled their financials first. Eleanor Harper's blog income, Robert Harper's engineering firm accounts, Madison's salary and assets, the BMW, the Bali trips, the good china, the Westport Colonial with its perfect landscaping and its Volvo in the driveway. He hired a private investigator named Ray Tatum, 20 years in insurance fraud before going independent, a man who could find documentation the way other people find their keys, and set him to work on the college fund. It took Ray 6 weeks. What he found was a paper trail that led from my grandparents' estate through a joint account in my parents' names to a lump payment toward Madison's car in August of 2013, $38,000. Gone in a wire transfer with my name in the memo field, as if someone had wanted a record that it had been for Emily. My old pediatrician, Dr. Miriam Osi, agreed to speak to investigators. She'd treated me from ages 4 through 16. She'd noted things in her files, bruising she'd been given explanations for that hadn't quite settled right. The language of a clinician who had suspected and documented and waited, not knowing what she was waiting for. My 8th grade homeroom teacher, a woman named Patricia Holloway who'd retired to Vermont, gave a written statement that referenced a January 2006 conference with my parents, during which she'd raised concerns about my classroom demeanor and been told, in so many words, that Emily was dramatic and attention-seeking. Meanwhile, Detective Chen was building her criminal case with the patience of a woman who has done this enough times to know that patience is the entire game. Mrs. Rodriguez gave her full statement on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after the incident. She was 67 years old, a retired school teacher, and she described what she saw through her kitchen window with the clarity and specificity of a witness who had watched the whole thing and understood immediately what she was seeing. She'd been watering her herb pots on the counter. She'd seen my mother pick up the wrench. It had been on the kitchen counter. She described the placement exactly. And she'd seen the moment of impact, and she'd called 911 while she was still watching. She wept, Detective Chen told me later, when she described Madison's laughter. The grand jury convened in February. They had Mrs. Rodriguez's testimony. They had the medical records. They had Officer Daly's report noting the repositioned wrench in the garage. They had the paramedics' documentation. They had Daniel's civil discovery, portions of which Chen had subpoenaed because the two cases had begun feeding each other in ways that neither of us had fully anticipated when we started. Eleanor Harper, Robert Harper, Madison Harper, charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and in my mother's case, attempted murder, because the medical examiner had testified that a second blow of equivalent force to the same region could have been fatal. Travis Mercer was arrested at his Goldman Sachs desk in Manhattan on a Thursday morning, accessory to assault, obstruction of justice for moving the wrench. His colleagues, according to the piece that ran in the Post the following Monday, watched the arrest in frozen silence. He was in handcuffs and an Italian suit at 10:14 a.m. I read that article 3 times. Part 6, the civil trial. Daniel put Dr. Fiona Marsh on the stand first. Dr. Marsh was a forensic psychologist with 27 years of experience in family systems and childhood trauma. She had a gray bun, a measured voice, and a gift for translating clinical language into something a jury could feel. She spent 90 minutes laying out what she called deliberate hierarchical abuse within a family unit, using my childhood as a case study with exhibits, charts, and a level of specificity that made 2 jurors stop taking notes and just listen. She used words like scapegoating and deliberate erasure and identity suppression. She pointed to the photographs Daniel had gathered, school pictures, family portraits, birthday photos, and walked through them one by one, noting my position in each, my expression, the quality of my clothing compared to Madison's. Then Daniel put the journals on the stand, not literally literally. You can't put a box of journals in the witness seat, but he had excerpts printed and numbered as exhibits, and he read portions aloud in his measured courtroom voice, and the jury heard 14 years of a girl carefully, methodically recording the shape of her own erasure. Exhibit F, my 13th birthday. No party, no acknowledgement. Madison had a friend sleep over, and they used my bedroom as an extra room. I wrote, I don't know if it's better or worse that they didn't even notice. Exhibit L, the college fund conversation. My mother's exact words written down the same night while they were still fresh and burning. Grandma and Grandpa would want us to use it wisely for the family. Exhibit R, a Sunday dinner, 2 years before the assault, during which I mentioned a promotion at work and my father asked if that meant they'd cut my salary. I'd written, I think they genuinely can't imagine me succeeding at something without it being a mistake. The jury stared at photos of my ruined face. Then they stared at photos of my childhood. They looked at both for a long time, as if they were connecting dots, watching the through line emerge from the noise. They deliberated for 3 hours, $3 million. The judge read the verdict on a Wednesday afternoon in April. I was sitting behind the plaintiff's table in a blazer I'd bought with the settlement advance Daniel had arranged. My jaw had been unwired for 6 weeks by then. The orbital fracture had healed mostly. I still had headaches in the evenings that the neurologist said could last another year. I heard the number and felt not triumph, not relief exactly, something quieter, like a weight I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten it was there had been set down on the floor. The judge ordered full liquidation of the Harper family's assets. I wasn't there when they took Madison's BMW from the driveway. A paralegal on Daniel's team sent me a photo because she is efficient and also, I think, understood that I needed to see it. The car sat on a flatbed in the gray morning light with a sticker on the windshield. I wasn't there when they boxed up the good china, the china my mother had never once let me touch, but I did go back to the house one last time, the week before it sold. Part 7. The house. A court officer let me in with a key, accompanied by Daniel and a quiet woman from the estate liquidation company named Terry, who had the kind of professional gentleness that comes from doing this job for a long time. The house was in the process of being inventoried. The furniture was still there, tagged with yellow stickers. The kitchen smelled like old coffee and the particular emptiness of a space that knows it's being vacated. I walked through the rooms slowly. Living room, dining room. The table still extended to its full length, still set for a ghost dinner. The kitchen, where the linoleum was the same linoleum, and the counter where the wrench had been sitting was just a counter now. I walked upstairs to my childhood bedroom last. It was small. It had always been small, but I'd grown up and I understood now, with adult spatial awareness, just how deliberately small. Madison's room was 3 times the size. Her room had a window seat. My room had a cot that sat in place of a real bed, with a scalloped headboard that had been purchased at a garage sale somewhere around my 8th birthday and never upgraded. Beige walls. No posters allowed. Something about the paint. I sat on the edge of the cot for a moment, felt the spring that had always poked through the thin mattress, looked at the closet. There was a box in the back corner that I recognized from childhood. Small, wooden, the kind that used to hold a set of stationery. I opened it. A dried flower, brown at the edges. It had been a yellow rose once. I remembered that from the Sunday afternoon my grandmother pressed it and wrapped it in tissue and handed it to me without explanation, the way people give children things when they can't give them what they actually need. And underneath the flower, a birthday card, pink envelope. My name on the front in a handwriting I would recognize anywhere, even now, for my Emily, who sees the world exactly as it is and loves it anyway. That is a gift. Don't let anyone tell you it's a problem. All my love, Gran. I sat with that card for a long time. I took it and the dried flower and walked out. The house sold in 11 days. The money, my share of it, the liquidated fraction that represented the court's judgment, hit my account on a Tuesday morning. I was at my desk at the New Haven nonprofit when the notification appeared on my phone. I set the phone down and looked at my computer screen, where a file was open for a 15-year-old boy named Marcus, who had aged out of a group home and needed transitional housing by Friday. I took a breath. I got back to work. Part 8. Christina. My phone rang at 3:17 p.m. on that same Tuesday. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, the way I always do with unknown numbers, a habit I'd developed in the years since the assault when the boundaries between professional and personal had needed to be carefully enforced. The voicemail was 22 seconds long. I listened to it 3 times. Ms. Harper, my name is Christina Mercer. I was Travis's wife. I know you have no reason to take this call, and I understand if you don't, but I found something in his emails that I think you need to know about. It doesn't end with your family. Please call me back. Her voice was careful, controlled. The voice of a woman who has rehearsed the message and is still barely holding the composure. I called Daniel first. Does the name Christina Mercer mean anything to your investigation? I asked. A pause. Travis's wife. She filed for divorce 2 weeks after his arrest. She's been cooperative with the DA's office on the obstruction charge, but nothing beyond that. Why? I told him about the voicemail. Another pause. Longer. Call her back, he said, but put me on standby and record the conversation. Connecticut is a one-party consent state. I looked that up before I dialed. Christina Mercer picked up on the second ring. She was in her car. I could hear road noise in the background. She'd driven to a parking lot, she told me, me, because she didn't feel safe making this call from anywhere near the apartment they'd shared, even though he'd been gone for months. "I want to explain what I found," she said, and her voice was still controlled. But underneath the control, there was something I recognized immediately. The specific exhaustion of a woman who has been carrying a secret that isn't hers. What she'd found was a secondary email account linked to a server based overseas, accessed through his personal laptop after she'd retained a forensic IT consultant as part of the divorce proceedings. The emails went back 4 years. Travis Mercer had been using his Goldman Sachs access, not official channels, but relationships and information derived from his position, to facilitate what the forensic accountant she'd retained had described as a serial financial exploitation pattern. He identified families, specifically families with structural vulnerabilities, internal conflict, estranged members, asset mismanagement. He cultivated relationships with them. He used those relationships and the trust that came with them to redirect assets, execute fraudulent investment schemes, and in several cases to manipulate family dynamics in ways that increase those vulnerabilities. My family wasn't his first. There are 6 other families in the emails, Christina said. Her voice barely wavered. "That I've found so far. I think he had been looking at your family for 2 years before he started dating Madison. The journal your sister kept, the one she showed him early in the relationship. He used it to map the dynamics, to understand where to apply pressure." I sat with that for a moment. The specific, nauseating clarity of a pattern snapping into focus. "That's what you do?" he'd asked across the dinner table. Calculating, appraising, not curiosity, reconnaissance. He hadn't been looking at me because he found me interesting. He'd been looking at me because I was the variable, the unpredictable element, the one member of the family who might, if pushed, become a problem. "How did he end up at Goldman Sachs?" I asked. "He had the credentials," she said, "the degree, the track record, but the people he targeted, a lot of them were referral sources. He kept his network close, a few of them, the ones he'd already exploited. I think they were afraid to say anything. I said, 'You need to go to the FBI.' 'I know,' she said. 'Today, I know.' A breath. 'I wanted to tell you first, because it started with you, or it ended with you. You're the one who blew it open.' I didn't say anything for a moment. 'I'm going to give you Daniel's number,' I said. 'He's the best litigation attorney I know. He'll refer you to someone who handles federal fraud. Don't wait.' 'Thank you, Christina.' I paused. 'I'm sorry he did this to you too.' She was quiet for a second. 'I'm sorry they did it to you,' she said. Epilogue. 9 months later, Eleanor Harper is serving a 7-year sentence at York Correctional Institution in Niantic, Connecticut. She was convicted of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and second-degree assault. Her lifestyle blog was deactivated the week of her sentencing. The last post she made, about the importance of family rituals, still has 200 comments. Most of them are from people who had no idea. Robert Harper received 5 years, with the possibility of parole after 3. His engineering license was suspended pending the criminal proceedings. The youth soccer plaque at the town recreation center has been quietly removed, according to someone who messaged me in March. Madison is out on bail, appealing her conviction. Her attorney is working on a reduced sentence in exchange for cooperation in the Travis Mercer federal case. I don't know what she told them. I don't need to know. Travis Mercer was indicted by the FBI on 17 counts of wire fraud, securities fraud, and conspiracy. The Goldman Sachs investigation identified 6 confirmed victims beyond my family, with 2 more under review. His apartment in Tribeca was seized. The Hamptons house, which had been purchased with funds from the scheme, is in the process of being liquidated. Christina Mercer's testimony was described by the federal prosecutor as critical and exceptionally detailed. She has filed a separate civil suit. Daniel referred her to an excellent attorney. I still work at the nonprofit. I got a small raise last fall and they gave me 2 new cases. Siblings, a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old, whose situation I am not going to describe in any detail because they deserve privacy and because their story is not mine to tell. I have a 1-bedroom apartment in East Rock with a real bed, not a cot, a bed, with a headboard I picked myself and a quilt I bought at a market on Orange Street last spring. I have a therapist named Dr. Yolanda Reyes, no relation to the paramedic, who I see every Tuesday at 5 p.m., who has a very calm voice and a gift for asking the single question that unravels whatever I've spent the preceding week carefully knotting back up. I have the wooden box on my bedside table, the dried flower, the birthday card. Who sees the world exactly as it is and loves it anyway? I think about that line a lot. I think about what it means to see clearly, really clearly, without the distortions of love or habit or the desperate need to believe that the people who made you are capable of protecting you. I spent 29 years trying to see my family charitably, trying to find the angle at which their behavior looked like something other than what it was. I don't try anymore. I see it exactly as it is, and I'm still here.